It's me, Brianna, and you're listening to episode 6 of Are We Caught Up Yet? Marvel Edition. You can find us on youtube.com/Save the Game Media and podcast services. If you want to show Save the Game Media extra love, you can get early access to all of our content. Patreon.com/Save the Game Media. Today, I am joined, as always, by my co-host and friend, Sam. How are you? What have you been watching? All of those fun things.
Regret to inform you, I haven't been watching anything. I've been a very, 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 very busy person the past week. So, legitimately,
Played anything fun? I think you
can either confirm or deny.
Humanity.
I did play Humanity. Platinumed that, by the way, 100% of it done. I'm just that good at puzzle games. That's just what it is. That was good. That's pretty much the only thing I've done in terms of like non-work things. I haven't watched anything. No films, no TV shows, nothing except for obviously what we're talking about today.
Okay.
How I'm doing, so. For context, I've had a migraine the entirety of today. Luckily, it has cleared up. So an hour or so prior to recording, I was like, Brie, I'll be good to go. I can do it. I can power through. And she's been trying to put me off. She's been going, Sam, just don't. I'm like, no, I am committed to the content, to you, the viewer, the listener. So you better appreciate it. I'm doing this for you and for me, because I like talking about this stuff, if that wasn't obvious already by the past 5 episodes of this podcast that we've done. How are you, Brie? What have you been watching?
I am doing pretty well. It's slowed down at work just a tiny bit just before the chaos. The chaos of 2 new hire classes coming through, one with 3 people, another with 4 people the week after. So it's gonna be crazy. But oh well. Let's see. What have I been watching? I've been watching anime titles, per usual. I think I'm like 3 episodes behind on Oshinoko. And then we just watched the first episode of Hell's Paradise. Fully caught up on Ted Lasso, which is amazing as always. And yeah, that is, I think, for the most part what I've been watching. Oh, I finished all of my rewatch of The Office.
Damn.
So yeah, all 9 seasons or whatever. So been watching Andy on YouTube play Dark Souls 3 because watching him play Dark Souls is like my favorite thing. If I can't fall asleep, I'll like turn on his Dark Souls 1 playthrough. Nice and relaxing.
You don't get woken up by the horrific shrieks and skrills that he lets out?
No, I don't know what it is. There's just something really calming about his voice. And it's just, I don't know, it's like a weird like comfort thing.
I get what you mean.
Sometimes I will turn on No Limits if I can't fall asleep too, just so I can listen to you and
Taylor's just got that silky smooth of a voice.
You both have nice voices, and it's like kind of nice to just listen to friends talk. But that's only
but you're really there for Taylor. You're really there for Taylor. Let's be real.
Sure.
He's got the famously silky smooth voice out of us.
Are you wanting me to compliment you? Is that what
I'm not.
is?
No,
You're
I'm just doing a bit. I'm just doing a bit.
All right.
Getting
Well,
some Taylor love.
Let's all pretend that Sam doesn't have a nice voice as well.
Me?
Other fun thing I did, I got a new phone case. You can't really see it, but it's a Barbie phone case. So, I just turned my flashlight on. I'm trying to flash people, I guess. Anyways, that's another fun thing I did this week. Bam, let's go ahead and get into it. It's been, I will say, just to give me any credit, just in case I have terrible memory, and it has been over a week since I watched this film. So if I don't remember something, I'm so sorry. I did not take notes like I normally do. Um, Firstly, spoiler free, general thoughts. How do we feel about this film? Sam?
Have we said what film it is? I mean, I know it's in the title, but I don't think we've actually said what the film is.
In
Right?
case I didn't read the title, it's The Avengers.
Or seen the thumbnail, I guess, as well. But yeah.
Yeah, just depending. Yeah. I mean, don't use your eyeballs and just use your ear holes. The
Yeah.
Avengers.
Cover all the bases.
Hmm.
Um,
All the holes.
yeah. Preferably not all. I think there are some that should be omitted from usage
From
in this
podcasting?
certain situation. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I'm sure there is an audience somewhere for that sort of stuff, but not here. Yeah, I think The Avengers is an excellent film. I thought that when it first released, and I continue to think so. I think it holds up incredibly well. It's unfortunate, not that you necessarily have too much insight into this, and it's not something that I'll harp on about, but I'll raise it so that people are conscientious that I know of it. It's unfortunate that the director of this film and the writer is human trash.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, we didn't know it when he was doing these films. It's only come to light afterwards. But yeah, Joss Whedon, which is unfortunate because do you know Firefly?
I've heard of Firefly. I refuse to watch it since it will never see the
I
light of
know
day again.
it's still worth watching, to be honest. But still, yeah, he did both this film and the second Avengers film. I won't raise it in the second Avengers film because I would have raised it here. But
Unless
yeah,
you forget.
No, I won't. I'll remember. It's not too long before we get to it, so yeah, it's unfortunate. But even with that, I think it's a case by case basis. But I think that a lot of the time it's important to separate the art from the artist because I still think that, Joss Whedon isn't the sole person involved in this thing. Hundreds and hundreds of people, both on and behind the camera, work so hard to make this happen.
That's always like the question that kind of gets raised. I feel like every time is like there are so many people involved with this film. Why does like the one person ruin everything?
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So it's always an interesting topic because I feel like there truly, as much as people want to stand on one side or the other, I don't think that there's truly a right answer in
No,
those
I mean it's
situations.
entirely your prerogative if you
Hmm.
decide that you don't want to watch a film that has a problematic director or writer or actor or whatever. That's totally fine. But I personally believe, as someone who is within the industry itself, I've trained professionally as an actor, and I've been on various sets, both screen and stage, and I personally, from my own lived experience, can't do that. I can't negate the hard work of X amount of other people who have only the best of intentions, and often have the most wonderful, um, hearts and minds that you can come across. Are so
Hmm.
creative and passionate, and it's unfortunate that it doesn't change the fact that this is tainted to some extent.
Hmm.
But I think that there's a degree of separation that I can allow. In most cases, like I say, sometimes it's entirely inexcusable, but that would have to be relatively extreme, I think. Anyway, we've raised it, said it, it's done. Joss Whedon is trash. Yeah, I think this film is excellent. I think it is. The sentence I'll use is that it is, to me, the proof of concept for the MCU. I've said to you both in previous episodes and off recording that this is sort of where you start seeing what they're doing with the MCU. You know, you can tie little things together in the previous films, but it's really here, in my opinion, where obviously, you know, things intersect on a much grander scale than we have seen thus far. But also, I think it not only is an excellent product in and of itself, but it lays the groundwork for future things so excellently, and it's so effortless as well, almost as if they weren't even trying. But it's just so masterfully acted, written, shot, that it's wonderful. It's not my favorite Avengers film, spoilers, but I think it is. This was the film. I mean, I was 100% in before the Avengers came out anyway. But even still, for like not only the large scale mass public, but even for me, it was like an affirmation that this was going to work. It could work, and it has worked. The sentiment that was going around before this film came out was like, wait, so there's like 6 heroes? How are you gonna give each of them enough screen time, enough, you know, story, character arc? It's like that. Just I don't see how that's going to work. And in my opinion, they did nail that. Everybody has something meaningful to contribute here, but also in retrospect, that is such a stupid sentiment, because 6 people in one film is going to be laughable very shortly, really, in the grand scheme of things. So it's like, to see how far we've come, even from this sort of fundamental cornerstone moment for the MCU and its storytelling. It's I do think it has gone, and deservedly so, gone down in history, and will be remembered for a very long time, I think.
Until they redo the whole thing again.
Until they
years.
reboot, and I get cast as someone, anyone.
Oh my god, I would
I'll
be
take
so
anything.
happy. I would be so happy for you. Oh my god, that would be so cool. Okay. Spoiler-free general thoughts from me. I thought this film was really good. I thought that I thought that it was cheesy, but it felt like purposefully cheesy rather than like gross cheesy, whatever that means. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think that I'm trying to think of like, I think I just generally had good feelings. It was like, okay, yeah, this is like a good movie, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
It knows what it wanted to be, and it just leaned into that fully.
Yeah. I think that I was slightly uncomfortable at part of it trying to mesh the heroes together. It almost felt like I don't know if you like remember those like old Cartoon Network like crossovers where they would be drawn in the other art style, and it's like almost uncomfortable seeing like the characters in another art style. It felt like that for a little bit, like towards the beginning.
Yeah.
But it smoothed itself out pretty quickly. So
yeah, it gives. I mean, the first example we see is Iron Man and Captain America standing next to each other when they've taken down Loki. And I'm 100% with you, where even though I was, like I say, 100% in at that specific point early in the film, I was like,
that's weird.
it's so weird to see them standing next to each other, even though we
Yeah.
know that that's what the concept of this film is. It's like it is bizarre. But no, I'm glad that you sort of at least to some degree, resonated with the film. Because I think that this, more so than many other things we'll end up talking about in the weeks and months to come, is like the litmus test. Like, if this didn't work for you, I don't know that most other stuff will. I was like, this is not that other stuff previously up to this point hasn't worked for you, like you've enjoyed some of the stuff, but like, if this, like the tone overall, the character dynamics, the sort of humor, if that didn't hit with you at all, I'd be like, all hope is lost. Like, you're just not
We're
gonna.
done.
Might as
Yeah.
well call it a day here. It's been a good ride,
Okay.
everybody. And not to say that like every film from this point forward is going to be exactly like this, because there are huge tonal divergences across the board. I mean, there's plenty of replications of this and iterations on this, but they don't rest on their laurels all the time. They are, especially more recently, going further afield creatively, which I'm sure you'll end up appreciating. But no, I'm relieved, I have to say.
Well, I'm glad that I could provide that. I almost kind of wish that I had jokingly been like, it was horrible. You should have
My
pranked
heart would
you.
have sunk. I probably would have just ditched out of the recording. I would have been like, no, okay,
No,
fine.
you know what? You know what you would have done? You would have leaned over to pretend you had ditched the recording, because that's what you always do.
That is true. I don't like being called out like that, but thank you.
I just want you to know that when you do that, we can still see your back for the
I
most
know.
part.
Look,
Okay.
I don't have that much
Okay.
flexibility. It's
Oh,
like I'm a
excuses.
robot. Excuses? The fuck? I had spinal fusion surgery.
I should tell you something
God damn it.
funny. This is a total tangent, and I promise we'll come back to the film. I'll be so quick. So, just for context for people listening, I was trying to learn how to roller skate, and I fell really hard on my butt. It's hurt for weeks. But your tailbone is technically part of your spine, so I wanted to message you and be like, twins.
God damn it.
I haven't done it for weeks, but just know every time it hurts, I think I'm like, I should message Sam. I'm so sorry.
No, it's good. I mean, hey, if you want to do it, you've sort of taken the sting off of it, so I've been way more accepting of the.
You wouldn't be mad though. You would just sigh. You'd just be like,
I would. I mean, I did just sigh, so I probably would just sigh again.
Yeah. Anyways, that's what I did. I had to tell you because Garrett was like, my best friend Garrett was like, how have you not told Sam yet? That's so funny. And I was like, all right. Anyways, there you go. One thing I do want to talk about for this film, I'm not there yet. He's not made the list, but I'm tentatively wondering if Captain America is going to make my simp list. I'm wondering.
Oh.
So far, I think no, but I'm slightly more open to the idea. I have a feeling that Thor kind of, I don't know. Thor could also potentially make the list, but I'm less inclined to believe that he will, just because for some reason, like the way his arrogance plays out doesn't really jive with me.
Okay.
Like, I don't mind arrogance or confidence in somebody, like, but it just doesn't sit that well with me. So,
Yeah.
nobody being added to the simp list just yet.
I wasn't anticipating that.
But I'm like Thanos. I'm so sorry. I'm out of control today. Okay, so yeah, that's the update for the simp list. Currently, we just have 2 people. It's gonna stay at 2 for now. Technically, we only have 1, but I have proactively added Loki to the list because I know.
Yeah.
So, alrighty. Let's jump in. I just want to jump straight into soundtrack. I'm so proud of them.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of them. They did the soundtrack thing. I will say, the The one thing that I find extremely disappointing about this situation is this could have been such an amazing moment. Like, imagine, like, for people that know Lord of the Rings, like Fellowship of the Ring, when the theme of the Fellowship breaks apart because they split in the music, like it breaks apart, and that's such a powerful music in the like moment in the music. Like they could have had that same thing, like where they like have the individual like themes, and as
Mm,
they like as the Avengers assemble, you realize that the themes all complement each other. Like how amazing would that moment have been?
yeah, yeah,
What a missed opportunity. Music is so powerful when used correctly, and they really screwed it on this one. I'm not saying I don't like the Avengers theme, and I am still very proud of them for having like like a memorable music theme finally. Very proud. But man, what a missed opportunity.
yeah. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But I still like that individual themes were present. Like I'm happy that, or at least if not theme specifically, the sort of tone musically of that character is carried over, either through licensed tracks for, like, when Iron Man first shows up, you get some music, or like, Thor is sort of very grandiose and um, epic. I don't like using that word, but I also don't like using. Well, no, I'll just stick with epic. There are other words I could have used, but I like that there are still echoes of the character musically, because they could have just gone with, like, this is the Avengers. We're just going to have a unique soundtrack just for the Avengers and not reflect each character even slightly. I mean, there are omissions, like Black Widow doesn't have anything, um, Hulk doesn't have anything, but for the others, I can think of at least one or two moments in the film where parts of their score kind of
Mm.
were
Honestly,
present.
I feel like that might be because you are so familiar with the films,
That's
because
fair.
for me, like, those themes are not memorable at all. Like, if you were to play, like, 5 songs and be like, "Which one is which?" Like, I would not know.
That's fair.
Whereas, like, I literally this is crazy. I had to test, like, for my Lord of the Rings class, I was tested on which theme is for what, like, what each theme is. Like, that's how specific each music piece is. So I would not know. So,
That's fair.
but I did still really like the music. I was very happy with the music and the way that they used it to emphasize some really good moments in the film. So,
Hmm.
yay, finally. Um okay, so do you want to do mm, so I would say I'm just going to we usually have a specific topic where we like talk about the through line of the story, but this whole thing is the through line. So I'm just going to say we can just not do that on to this
That's
time.
fine. Yeah.
The only thing that I would say is like through line past this is like setting up for like the next Avengers stuff at the very end, but that's not really there yet, if that makes sense. Like I think we saw Thanos, if I remember correctly.
Mm.
But
Yeah. There's plenty of seeds planted, both semi obvious and very obscure, that only you'll only know later down the line.
yeah.
Um, there's some intriguing stuff that I'll point out now, not
Okay.
in terms of a spoiler, but like things to maybe keep,
Keep an eye
thought.
on.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I was looking for. Um, Specifically, something like Loki's scepter. Um,
Mm.
he can use it in the film and does use it in the film to sort of take control of the minds of the people that it touches. Um, that could become that could play some pivotal role later down the line. And there's obviously, they don't really explain how it works in this. It's just sort of like it's one of the things you have to accept. You know, it's a concession you make to enjoy the film. You're like, okay, yeah, I guess he can do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Which explains what the post-credit scene was, where you saw him in the reflection, and it was the doctor being like, the scientist being like, oh, maybe this blue square is worth a look. He was obviously in control of him at that point. I say obviously, it's only sort of semi-obvious now. And this blue cube, it keeps showing up. It obviously, it's very powerful, can do a number of things. Limitless energy, they talk about at the start of the film, but then it's also like acts as a two-way portal that can be controlled. So there's a lot of things that they sort of set in motion, that's how they hook you. They sort of like, there's like a little piece of bait on a hook, and you're a little fish, you just get a little nibble and you're like, oh, that's tasty, but then you keep following the bait. That's what they do. They're like,
Okay.
Here's a little bit of bait, here's a little nibble or something. You're like, oh, that's interesting, I guess I'll go along to the next film that they release to make sure I'm caught up on that. And then, oh, there's more bait over here, and so on, so on, so on. I've been on the hook for over a decade now. But yeah, it's just like when I say that this film is proof of concept, I don't only mean that in terms of what they've been building towards was actually paid off and was successfully executed, but they also lay the foundation of, there are so many small things at work that, again, you kind of just sort of breeze over because you're just following the story, and you're like, yep, okay, that's fine if that's what's going to happen. Like there's a massive gun that gets shot, Loki gets shot with, and you're like, okay, I guess they just have a massive gun, and why do they have that massive gun that does that thing? And it's all important. That's what I'm trying to say. That's always very long-winded.
Can I ask, so firstly, could you watch the Avengers film separate from everything else? Like, just watch the Avengers film?
Just this film, you mean?
No, like all of the Avengers films.
No,
separate from all the individual films.
No shot. No shot.
No? Okay.
No.
Interesting.
You could maybe get away with watching the first two without watching anything else. I mean, you would still be somewhat on the back step, in terms of catching up. And again, you would be a little bit confused about why certain characters are the way they are and what are they referencing here, and
Yeah, but you could generally follow the storyline.
You could generally follow it, but yeah, when we
Okay.
get to the second two Avengers film, there is absolutely no chance you would be like, yeah.
Okay.
No shot.
Interesting. Alrighty. So then the other question I was gonna ask is, what was I gonna ask? Oh, would you say that it's better to like, is it a better experience watching? So let's say you watch the whole thing all the way through to where it is currently, and then you go through and watch the second time. Would you say that it's better the second time around, or do you think it's like the first time is the magic?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I think it depends on how much you care. If you just watch these films, you go and see the new one when it comes out, and I'm not talking about you specifically, but just if you're a person who casually watches the films because you're like, want to see what's in the movie theater this month. Oh, there's a new Marvel film, I've seen a fair few of them over the years, I'll watch this one. And you just go in to have a bit of fun and you don't really care about all the intricacies and stuff, then I think, just take it at face value the first time you see it and move on. That being said, again, I'm kind of a bad person to ask. I know what you mean. I know what you're getting at. You can't really ask anybody else right now. but because I'm so heavily invested. No, actually, no, because even if I wasn't that heavily invested, I know, because I've seen all of these films plenty of times at this point, I know that you get more out of it on repeat viewing, especially, not always the case, but because the narrative is just a straight line, one thing leads into the next, into the next, into the next. Not necessarily referencing the last film in the next film, if you know what I mean, but there's not a lot of time jumping around. Obviously, we had it with Captain America. There is one other example of it where it's very clearly set in the past, down the line, but because, I'm trying to word this without spoilers, I think some of the character developments in particular that happen in later films is even more rewarding to come back to something like this film and reap it just a little bit more. There's not necessarily tons all the time. Like for you, again, depending on where you sort of end up a little further into this journey, in terms of how you feel about it all, I wouldn't necessarily say like I wouldn't urge you to go back and watch everything, but I might, once we get to a certain point, be like, it might be worth just diving back in and being like, you see, you get it, that kind of thing. So I think it's a really nuanced answer. It depends very much on sort of where your headspace is with this stuff. That again, but that being said, there is 100% value to be gained from rewatching it. It's just you're only really going to harvest that value if you know that you are invested.
Yeah.
If that makes
one
sense.
of my favorite teachers from the University of Utah, he said anything worth watching or reading is worth rewatching and rereading. And I know not everybody agrees with that, but I still think that stands. So it makes sense that it would be worth the rewatch. And I assume if you're even thinking about rewatching it, you'd be like you'd be passionate enough about the story to kind of see where that leads. So
yeah, I think, and also just like bouncing off of that, the fact that the MCU, I mean, there have been things that have tried to copy it since the MCU started. Obviously, everyone wants on the sort of cinematic universe train these days, but because the MCU is such a behemoth, and at this point there are so many projects, it is like a daunting task for anybody. Because if you want to get in, you really kind of do have to start at the start. But then that also then means that you need to sit through like 30 plus projects to catch
and
up.
a lot of them are like 2 hours. Like,
yeah. And we get to like 6 hour stuff when the shows start coming. So it's like that's a lot of time. And again, on top of that, it depends on what kind of person you are, because I know that even if I'm not super enjoying something, most of the time, unless it's really god awful, I kind of need to see it through. You know what I mean? But once I start, I kind of have to finish. So, like,
yeah, same. I finish stuff all the time.
That's categorically untrue. But it's like, so it's really hard to say. I would say yes. I would say these are worth rewatching if you if you care enough to continue watching these films. I'd say they're worth another go. Not necessarily straight away, but like when we're a fair bit further down the line, I think there is like an inherent desire to be like, things are so different now. I kind of want to go back and see if it was how I remember it being, and you'll find new stuff there. And obviously things will link from the very start all the way to where we are now, and that continues to be the case. So it's like an endlessly rewarding thing if you're in the mindset for it.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
We should catch up on One Piece next, speaking of. And then we can rewatch it too.
It's only like 800 or something episodes, is that
Oh,
right?
it's like 1,200 right
Oh,
now.
Jesus Christ.
And they're just getting to the actual story where they're gonna go find the One Piece.
I think not.
Come on, 25 years of television. Anyways.
Nope.
Uh, okay. So we talked about this. We talked about this. Okay, so next we can talk about the story for the movie, the themes, or the characters. How do you feel?
How do you feel? This is the first time you've seen it.
I feel hot because there's no AC. Let's
Fair.
see. Uh, let's go ahead and cover. I feel like themes is a good way to start for this because there's a lot of different characters, and I feel like themes will be like a little bit more streamlined of a discussion. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Questioning myself as I say it out loud. Themes. Okay. So one of the themes that I think is really interesting, and I imagine it's going to continue to be interesting, not only like in the Avengers films, but in individual films as well, is like what does it mean to be a hero? And like how are these different characters heroes in their own way? Because they're clearly not like heroes in the same way. Like they don't believe in the same things, they're not the same people. That would be really boring. And so they all are heroes in their own destructive ways. So I think that that's like a really interesting theme. And I like watching how those kinds of, I don't want to say like morals, but like those driving forces maybe interact with each other.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Captain America is like more of like the quote unquote like true hero, as compared to the other people having their own motivations. Even if they do still want to help people, they it feels like they a lot of them have their own motivations to do the things that they do. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think it's part of the, and I'll try not to ramble here. The
No, please
the
ramble. That's what we're here for.
the it's really the magic of the MCU more so than anything, because you know the CGI and special effects and spectacle and big fight scenes and stuff, that's cool. But really, the thing that has kept me invested so much is the characters, the dynamics, how fundamentally different these characters become from project to project because of what happened to them in each film.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we see, because we've experienced an individual whole film story with the majority of the main characters here, we sort of we have the groundwork laid for how each of them thinks, how each of them feels, and more often than not, they are in stark contrast to one another. And as any sort of team up, culmination event project in whatever medium is,
Mm-hmm.
when they team up, the sort of tension and butting of heads is arguably the most compelling and interesting part of the narrative. And that is the case here as well. But I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of sort of what it means to be a hero, because they each of them, all six of the main Avengers, in my opinion, have a preconceived notion of what being a hero to them is. You know, Tony is a hero driven by ego and bravado. Cap is, as you say, a hero driven sort of by virtue and morals and fighting the good fight for the little man. Thor is a hero by birthright. He thinks he's this self-entitled, but there's a clear distinction between the self-entitlement that Tony has and the self-entitlement that Thor has. And then you go to Hulk, and Hulk is or Banner, Bruce Banner, I should say, and he's a hero. Regardless of whether he chose to be or not, he doesn't really have a choice because he's this very timid, unassuming person who doesn't like conflict. and then you have like even Black Widow and Hawkeye, whilst they're in terms of abilities and stuff the least compelling, I think the human element that they bring, where it is just people, really skilled people, no doubt, but just people, even more just bare human than Tony is, because Tony at least has his suit. I think that the dynamic and the sort of the groundedness that they bring to the team is not necessarily the most compelling thing in this film specifically, but I think that they are an important element to the team overall, and that remains to be the case going forward, because it's not necessarily super expanded upon, but in the scene where Black Widow is speaking to Loki when he's in the cell, she very clearly explains that she did some really bad stuff in her past, and she joined the Avengers or joined Shield to sort of try and make things right, to sort of ease her conscience. And Hawkeye is, I think Hawkeye is sort of similar to Cap in the sense that he is just like a down to earth guy who knows he really isn't in the same league as any of these people, but still shows up regardless. Yeah. And that's like a very easy, as much as he's not exciting as a hero necessarily, he's not like, oh cool, I'd want to be Hawkeye. He is the easiest person to sort of, for a lot of the audience to sort of step into the shoes of, because of how vulnerable he is and out of his depth he appears, even though he still proves himself to be very competent. So yeah, I think that, again, I rambled. Who knew? Who would have guessed? But I think that that what I just said is expanding upon your point, which I think is the most salient one that could be made in terms of theme. It's weird because that is like arguably the most basic thing that could be done in a superhero story, like what it means to be a superhero. But I just think that, again, going back to the writing and the performances, these characters have been so well crafted up to this point and expertly portrayed that even though they have these clashing personalities and the dynamic is rocky at the best of times, it does find a way to work and click and make sense by the end of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the only other theme that I would suggest is, and it's not necessarily across the board, and it is sort of goes hand in hand with what it means to be a hero thing, but it's like the sacrifice of ego for the betterment of a larger whole, because all of these characters in one way or another are, I shouldn't say all, like at least four of them are unwilling and reluctant to, they believe that teaming up would be a worse thing to do than sort of striking out on their own and doing their own thing, because they all know that they've been doing their own thing up until this point and it's been working for the most part. But the whole plot of the film is that there's this major threat that they know is coming in one degree or another, and they just physically can't do it. And it's like they have to make that logical leap where it's like they feel they can do anything because they're heroes, but they sort of get a slap of reality where it's like, no, okay, you need to realize that there's something bigger than just, again, my ego at stake. I can do all these fantastical things, but in the larger scope of what's about to go down, I just cannot handle it alone. And I just like how characters like Tony, like Thor, even Hulk, sort of have to push through that and they're even pushing against it, but they're still going in the right direction, even if they don't realize it.
I think that there's a lot to be said for that, because I think that a lot of people in the world could stand to ask for help more often. And so even just at like a human level, like watching these like really powerful, really strong beings like have to not necessarily ask like, hey, I need help, but realize that they do need help and kind of acknowledge that within themselves. I think that's really cool, because I think way more people could stand to ask for help when they need it, including myself.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, they're all broken people.
hmm?
You know, Tony is struggling with a number of things, but he just doesn't let it show. Even going back to like something simple that hasn't really been expanded upon too much at this point. There's obviously been sentiments throughout all the Iron Man films up to this point, but like, you know, his father being absent and sort of not really having a great childhood from the sounds of things. Like, that isn't something that you naturally pick up from this, but I think the context, having watched the previous films, even if you don't consciously acknowledge it whilst watching this film, I still think that it adds something, even subconsciously, to Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, if we're talking specifically about his character, and that's across the board. I mean, obviously, Mark Ruffalo is new to this film for Hulk, but I still think he treads a fine line. You know, Thor is broken because he's only recently sort of re-earned his worth. His brother is obviously the one causing these issues.
How embarrassing.
Cap, I
like,
know.
it's my brother.
Well, I mean, it's like the line that he says where it's like, you know, don't speak ill of him. He's my brother. And he's like, he killed like 15 people. He's like, well, he's adopted. Excellent. And Cap is like a man out of time. You know, he knows nobody here. He doesn't belong.
That must be so lonely, like genuinely and truly.
And, you know, I think, again, that's something that isn't really expounded upon. But you could, like you asked earlier, could you watch these films without anything else? I think you could, but you might look at someone like Captain America and just be like, oh, he's a cool dude in a suit. That's awesome. But having seen Captain America, you know what he's gone through up to this point, and I think that recontextualizes some of the actions or things that he says in this film. It's sort of, you don't have to fill in gaps because they've already been filled in for you. So it's sort of, you see Captain America or Iron Man do a thing, and whether it's funny or, you know, an epic cool moment or a profound moment, and it's satisfying because you know that makes sense for the character to do, because you know what these characters are like, because you've been with them before. And obviously that sort of dynamic and play out in your head will only expand the more projects that we get and the more experiences that these characters have, either alone or together. So yeah, I think that, and like Hulk is, you know, Bruce is, he talks about some pretty dark stuff in this film. About how he struggles.
I loved how he was like, it's because I'm always angry.
Yeah.
That was such a good line. I was so like just so excited. I was like, oh my god.
And again, like
that.
The moment that line is said is like, again, a cool moment, because he's like, he just automatically immediately hulks out and he punches the thing and brings it down and saves the day at the last split second. But if you reflect on that line and sort of like the implications of what that means, and again, to your other question about going back and watching this, you see, and I think it's evident the first watch, to be fair, but even more so the second time, you go back and you see Bruce in early scenes of this film before that moment, and you can detect like seething anger beneath the surface. Like he's a very placent guy, and he's very sort of bumbling, and just sort of, oh, I'm here now, and oh, I don't want to get involved. And you're like, well, that makes sense because he doesn't want to get angry. But with the knowledge that he is always like raging inside, and that's the only way that he's found, because he goes, I mean, I won't necessarily say it specifically what he says he has done or tried to do, but it's like he has gone to some real dark places because he just couldn't cope. He's like, this is too much of a burden. But the way that he's found to control it is, I'm not going to say arguably worse, but it's like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. He just doesn't have a good out, and he's found the least bad of all of the bad options.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think like there's really compelling stuff character-wise, even within moments that are just meant to be like, oh, that was really badass when he said that line and turned into the Hulk and punched the big thing and the explosions went off. And I think that there are multiple moments of that for every character throughout this film. So, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well,
What were we talking about? We're talking about being broken. I know, I was joking.
Yeah.
We were talking about people being broken and needing help.
Yes, we were. Is there any other themes that you wanted to touch on while we're here?
Not necessarily on a large scale. There's plenty of, and we'd be here for hours if we delved into like character by character themes. I think there's just something minor to be said about the mind space, the sort of headspace of Loki, and because it's not a spoiler. He doesn't die at the end of this film, and by hook or by crook, that he persists as a character at least up to a certain point, as far as throughout the rest of the MCU.
It's honestly, he's just like a lonely boy. That's like all this is.
Again, it's sort of you can look at him as a very one-note villain, but with prior context added in, you realize he is quite a tragic character. And his motivations are somewhat understandable. He's talking about world domination and stuff, but really the root of that is his desire to feel important, because he's lived in Thor's shadow his entire life, and obviously him learning about his real heritage and whatnot, I think that has further sort of alienated him from the person that even he thought he was. It's just like he is completely lost to the point where he was sort of practically, committing himself to die at the end of the Thor film. As far as he was aware, he just fell into, whatever that black hole was. And he obviously didn't die, but I think that he is in a headspace of, what have I got to lose? But also I think there's far more to it than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's like committing. I think that's kind of what gets him in these messes a lot, is that he like realizes he messes up and commits to the mess up rather than like apologizing and like taking ownership of the mess up. And that feels like what happens like a lot. Like even just from like the beginning of the Thor film, like you just watch, like he messes up, he gets his feelings hurt, he commits, he doubles down, and it just keeps happening again and again. And so, I mean, it makes sense. Like when you look at his like character arc through the two films, like it makes sense how he ends up where he does end up, and like why he ends up in that place. He's like, well, screw all of you, I'm just gonna rule the world then.
Because he thinks that is the only logical solution. He doesn't like failing because he's felt like a failure his whole life, because he has this thing that he couldn't possibly live up to. but he hasn't considered of striking out and being his own person. So he just sort of like, okay, well, Thor is eventually going to rule over Asgard. Well, so I have no chance of doing that there. He sees humans as these lesser beings. He sees anything that isn't Asgardian as lesser beings. So he feels, well, there aren't going to be any consequences if I just decide to, they're all going to bow down to me, because that's what he's like at the start of the film. He's just like, you're all
Mhm.
going to kneel. Nobody's going to stop me. I'm a god. If I want to do this, I can, and I will. He's obviously proven wrong, but I think that you can't help but feel bad for him, because like, if you just stopped trying so hard
Mhm.
to either get back at Thor and Odin, or trying to be this massive important thing, you could be not only just a brother to Thor, but also like this really awesome team member if you wanted to join a team, or just
Yeah, I
this
mean, he
really
has a
interesting
space
guy.
there.
Yeah,
He has a space there waiting for him.
yeah,
Like, he has, like, a support system there. It's just that he doesn't want that support system.
yeah. He's
Or, I mean, I
unwilling
don't
to
know if that's
accept it.
fair. Yeah, unwilling to accept the support system. I was gonna say, I think he does want the support system. I think that maybe he just thinks he's not worthy of it.
I think it's a bit of both, because again, going back to the whole thing of like heroes needing help, it's like, so does Loki, but he's partially unwilling to accept it because he doesn't want to acknowledge the fact that he needs the help,
Yeah.
but also at the same time he knows that he does,
Yeah. I
but he
mean, I
knows
think
that if he does, he's admitting to needing the help.
yeah. And that's not very manly. Men can't do
No,
that.
no,
It's not very alpha.
no.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that he's a very compelling villain. Like when you like sit and like talk about it and stuff like that.
Mm.
So I like it. Speaking of villains, I really liked the weird creatures at the end. I don't know what was going on. I don't know where they're from. I just thought they were kind of cool. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, yeah, they look cool. And giant weird whale things. I don't know.
One of the concessions you have to make, they just
Do they come
alien.
back?
Would you want me to tell you if they do or not?
I mean, kind of, because like, are they just throwaway enemies or are they actually a thing? Like, are they just like mob enemies? Does that make sense?
Are they just fodder?
Yeah.
Yes and no.
Okay. So they have meaning, but they're still fodder.
Yes and no.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
I
Good
will
enough
say,
for me.
I'll say this isn't the only time you'll see them.
Okay.
But to what extent, in what context,
Okay.
who
Sounds good.
knows?
All right. So then for other characters, is there any other characters? I feel like we've touched on a lot of them in talking about themes. Is there any other characters that you really wanted to like double down on? Man, rest in peace to whatever his name, Agent whoever.
Coulson,
Like,
yeah,
yeah, there we go.
he's
The son of
been
Cole.
son of Cole. What again? What an excellent line. And it makes
Rest in
sense.
peace.
That is what Thor would say. I I would have said Nick Fury, but he doesn't really have that much in terms of like character development necessarily. It's just sort of like,
No, he's
again,
just
in
like
relation
a
to,
manipulative character in the background, right?
yeah, like talking about when Coulson dies, it's like he fakes the fact that Coulson had the trading
The
cards in
trading
his pocket.
cards. Yeah.
Like, he didn't. They were somewhere else, but he purposely made it look like he died with them on him, so that not only did the Avengers feel bad, but also they felt like, hence the name, they had
Yeah.
to avenge him, because that is realistically what they are avenging more so than
Pull it
anything else
together.
in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Because you could argue they're avenging the damage that had started to be wrought on New York from the attack, but you know, the thing that actually pulls them back together is the fact that this character, who has, for the most part, been the one that interacts with every single one of them in one form or another, for the most part, has now died, and it's really the first sign that, because with a lot of superhero stuff, you're sort of like, there aren't really that many stakes, but again,
Yeah, the plot armor.
Yeah, exactly. And also just by superheroes' nature, they are often sort of not indestructible, but close to it. Again, talking about like Hawkeye and Black Widow and the human element being really important. The fact that Coulson is there, he does his best to help, dies, and stays dead. Spoilers, I guess, but also not, because he's dead. I think that is something that is not a full counterpoint to any arguments that could be brought against the MCU for being like too safe, but I think that it is still relevant in that conversation, because Coulson could very easily have been this recurring character that shows up and it's like, well, he's been here from the start, and he's like, you know, again, alongside all the other characters, gets tons of developments and gets, I don't know, a larger role in the next Captain America film or something because he's a massive fan of him or something. But the fact that the first time that all these characters came together, killed off a guy that, again, was there from the start and has sort of been instrumental in sort of feeding them this information about S.H.I.E.L.D. and the whole idea of putting a team together and stuff. I think it's really good. Like, again, not that Coulson himself was a super compelling character in and of himself. I like the little stuff that they gave him, again, like being a fan of Captain America and stuff. That's just nice. A little bit of character building. But sort of, it's more what he represents that I think is the more important and powerful thing to consider, in the wider scheme of this film, and just sort of what risks this franchise as a whole is willing to take. Because I think that is important in making it feel less stale, if you know that there are actually things on the line that could be lost in certain situations, especially when things get as bad and as chaotic as they do towards the end of this film. So
Yeah. I think, like, surprisingly, I'm not usually one for like action. I actually really did enjoy like the ending of this film. Like where they had like all their own tasks and like all of that action at the end. I think I really did enjoy, because I think like each hero kind of got like their own moments and like kind of interacting with the others kinds of moments and stuff like that. I don't know. I really enjoyed those action sequences, which I usually don't with films, because I'm usually just like, oh, cool, explosions. You know?
And I think thematically, it's like the whole thing of the broken dynamic and them having such juxtaposing personalities. You're like, how could this team ever work? You know, by the nature of the beast, that they will obviously all come together. But like you say, the fact that in that final fight specifically, they are using their powers to complement one another.
Yeah. And they
It's
just kind of like
satisfying.
flip between fights too, right? They'll like
Yeah.
they'll be fighting one thing, encounter somebody else, help them, and then keep going. And like those kinds of like through moments, like as they interact, are really satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Thor, Hulk can rip something big off, stab it into a thing so that Thor can then hammer it in. Iron
Mhm.
Man can shoot a beam out that can get deflected and angled off of Cap's shield. Cap can launch people into the air. I think it's, again, there is no other word than satisfying. I think it's not only in terms of narrative, because you're like, wow, they've come together, they're working as a team, which is, again, like you said at the very top, a bit cheesy, but it's like,
Mhm.
you know, we're here to have fun.
Yeah.
this is what this is. It's just a bit of fun. So yeah, no, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Okay, cool. I will say this is like slightly tangent, but you were talking about Captain America's shield, so it made me think about it. There's an anime. It's not the best anime ever, but it's actually based on a light novel. Anyways, that was a tangent. But it's called Rising of the Shield Hero, and I think it really expands like on a lot of the Captain America themes in a weird way. So for anybody that's like interested in a shield hero, I might recommend that. It's a lot darker, I'd say, than like a lot of these earlier films are. I imagine that Marvel will eventually get darker. But a lot of these earlier films, it's a bit darker because it's about this guy that is isekai'd or like sent to another world. I guess summoned would be a better phrase. And there's 4 heroes. Each gets like a weapon. There's like the bow hero, the sword, the shield, and then the spear. That's the other one. And everybody's like, oh, shield's completely useless. Who cares about a shield hero? And he kind of gets thrown away and screwed over by everybody and almost becomes a villain, kind of, but he's still a hero, kind of anti-hero kind of thing. Anyways, that was my tangent on shield hero stuff. But kind of a trashy anime, but also kind of good. Yeah. So that's that. The other thing I was going to say about Captain America, I hate everybody's going to get mad. I hate his uniform so much. It's so ugly. Both the first one and this one.
That's not a controversial statement.
No, okay. I feel like I was going to get in trouble for that, but man, I hate it. I'm like, he could be so much like, especially the helmet thing. Like, what is going on?
I think when
Oh
he
my
doesn't
God.
have the helmet on, it doesn't look too bad.
Yeah.
I'd say the suit that he has in the first film is better than this one, because this one, rightly so, because it's just the tone of the film overall, leans more into like a comic booky look. Like it looks more comic booky, which again leads into what we're talking about of it looking a bit weird when they're on screen together. But yeah, no, that's not a controversial take. And I will reassure you. I will reassure you, his looks drastically improve going forward.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
it's good to know, because man, that helmet is not it.
Not doing you any favors.
It's not doing anyone.
I think the helmet might be the one thing keeping him off your simplest, to be honest.
I don't think so. Think so.
No,
I really, really like truly like if you're talking about like it's not that I don't think that like people who are super muscular are attractive. Like, it's like, oh yeah, muscles, like you're fit, that's cool, whatever. But like it's not really what I go for and what I'm looking for. And so like it's not like the thing and I feel like that's all he really has going for him right now. It's just like, oh, he's super muscular, like
yeah.
And so I think like I need more than just like, oh, he's super muscular, because like muscles aren't a bad thing, but I'm also that's not really what I'm looking for. So that's the real answer. Anyways. Okay, let's see. Sad to report, this does not pass the Bechdel test.
Darn.
Can you believe it? Oh well.
I can believe it.
Most of them have not passed. I think there's been like what, 2 so far?
Yeah, if that.
Yeah, if that. I know there's one for sure. The second one I can't remember. Oh wait, yeah. Thor and Iron Man 2.
That's right. Yeah.
They both do.
Barely.
Barely.
A pass is a pass.
Okay. Well, I think we've kind of touched everything that we usually touch. Is there anything else you kind of wanted to discuss with this film? Like anything else you're like, man, I really want to talk about this?
Not necessarily, other than the sentiment. And I swear I'm not repeating myself. I am making a different, tangentially attached point, but still a different point. And this is only really like a lot of people might not care about it when I say this, but the fact that the MCU exists at all is a miracle. Because again, so many things, so many franchises and movie studios nowadays are trying to replicate this because it's worked so well and has made so much money. But for like, if you put yourself in the headspace of it being 2012, nobody has done this yet to this scale anyway. For it to have worked up to this point, to have all sort of been consistent in the more important elements anyway, to be consistent, and for it to actually succeed when it reaches what at the time was like the peak culmination moment is, again, I think it's miraculous. It seems like less of an impressive feat nowadays because so many people are doing similar things, but this was like mind blowing because, again, like I
For
said,
movies, yeah.
so many people had doubts about this going in, and like I'm forward thinking a lot here, but the fact that we thought that then and we are where we are now, like we wouldn't be where we are now if it wasn't for this film and how successful it was, not only financially and critically, but also in terms of what it was trying to do. I don't think we'd still be getting Marvel content if
Yeah.
this film
Well,
didn't do what it did.
yeah, and I think that it's also had lasting effects on other industries as well, right? Like, so like the books to film kind of thing, like video games to film,
Yeah,
like I don't know, like I think that like we're kind of seeing like a ripple effect where it's not like, oh, it's not cool to be nerdy. We just need these like garbage films kind of thing. It's
yeah,
now like I don't want to say it's like cool to be nerdy, but like people are a lot more excited about nerdy things and just like letting themselves be excited rather than like trying to ruin everybody else's excitement kind of
yeah.
thing.
And like, not that it
So,
was like a 1 minute it wasn't cool and now it is because Avengers has come out, but I do think that Avengers in that conversation specifically is vitally important because this film, again, going back to the proof of concept thing, was like not only to what you were saying of like adaptations from comic books
mhm,
and these big culmination storylines in comics being viable, adaptation worthy, but it did shift the conversation in terms
mhm,
of, is it cool to like these films? Because so many people were like, well, I saw the Iron Man film and that was cool, but then I saw the Captain America film and that was a bit different. I just didn't really vibe with it. But then this was like, oh, not only do we now all see what they're actually aiming for here, and we see the potential in it in terms of
mhm,
storytelling, but it did like, I, again, cheesy, but this film is just like a cool film.
mhm,
It's just like people couldn't argue against it, and that helped to make it the case where nowadays I think you'd be hard pressed if you were in a relatively large group of people. You'd be hard pressed to find it, to not find at least one or two people that were like super to the MCU,
mhm.
which is a feat in and of itself. I think that it just became so widespread, beloved, or not even just beloved, but just like everybody's seen it. You know, everybody, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So many people have seen it. So many more people are talking about it all the time, positively or negatively. It's just become this behemoth, and this really was the leaping point for all of that.
Mhm,
So it cannot be understated the importance of this film, not only for the franchise, but in terms of pop culture, media, like you say, just the general film industry in general. I just think media in general. I think this
mhm.
film is it. Like I said, it will go down in history,
Yeah,
deservedly so.
absolutely. Well, we have one other thing we need to do, the ranking list.
Yes.
I think this is probably number one on my list. above Thor. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that there's like more to be had here in terms of like depth of
I
story.
agree.
Okay. Number one for you as well, then.
Yep.
Okay.
It hurts my heart because I do love Thor, but this film is just better. It is just better.
Yeah. I realize we don't have a simplest here for you. Should we be keeping a simplest and updating it as we continue?
But for me,
yeah.
No, it's fine.
Are you sure? Because
I think it would be somewhat redundant because to some degree I simp for most of these characters now. So
right, but we're updating it week by week, so we're seeing how the simplest. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but it'd be really hard for me to recall specifically when I started simping. I mean, for some characters it'd be obvious, but for a lot of them I'd be like, well, was this the point or was this the point? And then we'd get into, completely different discussions. So
okay. Well, I mean, that's really the only discussion I'm here for is like the simplest.
Nothing else matters. Nothing else matters.
No.
Well, at least we've gotten to the root of what you're here for. Just simping over these fictional characters. Hey,
this is how this is how I determine a lot of anime. I'm like, is there attractive characters? Yes or no? Okay, I'll watch it. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
That's shallow, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, I can't knock it, to be honest.
Yeah. Listen.
Yeah.
Especially if there's a white-haired character, it's over for me.
We got some of those coming up. So.
Oh no, we don't. Oh God.
Yeah. I can think of.
I didn't realize that there were white-haired characters.
4 white-haired characters.
Oh God.
Not like that we'll all meet soon, but eventually.
Yeah.
At least 4.
Well, maybe it's just an anime thing. We'll hope.
Yeah, I think one of them I don't think you'd simp for, but others potentially, yeah.
Okay, I guess we'll see. Alrighty, let's see. Okay, so that is everything I think for this episode. Yes, you're good.
We finished phase 1.
Okay.
We did it.
Oh wait, I was gonna ask you what's next. Iron Man 3?
Oh, you gotta go and put me on the spot like that.
I couldn't remember.
Let's see.
In order.
Yes, it is.
Release order.
It is Iron Man 3.
Phase 1. Okay, yeah, and we're heading into phase 2. So Iron Man 3. Then I didn't realize Ant-Man was part of phase 2. That's kind of weird, right?
Is it?
I think it's weird because of like, why wouldn't you end it with an Avengers? Oh, they do that with phase 3 as well.
Yeah, the Avengers films aren't like the end of each of the. I see what you mean because there are currently 4 Avengers films and there have been 4 phases, but the 5th one is currently going on. But no, well, I mean, yeah, because 2 of the Avengers films were in phase 3. 2 of the Avengers films were in phase 3, so there wasn't one in phase 4. But
interesting.
I know that does make sense, like logically, that you'd have the supposedly biggest films at the end, but no, not the case.
Okay. Well, here we head into phase 2. We made it. Iron Man 3.
Wait, quarter of the way through. That's a complete lie.
That was a huge lie. That was a huge lie. We have to make
in terms of phases.
Phase 2.
In terms of phases.
Yeah, but phase 4 is like he's thick, double cheeked up.
As is phase 3. There's a lot in phase 3 as well.
Phase 3, yeah. I mean, it is bigger compared to phase 1 and 2, but phase 4 is really the
same. Oh yeah, phase 4 is where we get the shows. So
yeah. Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's why.
Do you think they're making too many shows at this point? I feel like there's a lot.
They've stopped. They've pulled back on the number of stuff they're doing now. Okay. It's a whole thing. We'll get to it in like 2 years' time.
It better not take that long.
It's not going to take
that long. I'm trying to catch up.
Yeah.
Hence the are we caught up yet?
Exactly. We'll do it. We'll manage.
Alrighty. Well, let's jump into our thank yous. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and listening or watching, I guess. You just like put it on mute and just like watch us talk. Like not even blinking, just like.
That'd be weird.
No, we're
Got a
so
reflection
cute,
glow.
Sam. That's why people just stare at us. Special shout out to our patrons. We have Bucky Blue, Amon, Fabulous Brianna, Brianna's mom, Brianna's brother, Brianna's wife, Nikolai at Night, Cypher Primus, Brendan Myers, Marcus O'Neill, Lillian, Mimi J, The Snack Network, David Hotright, Dave Harp, and the Xbox Expansion Pass. Thank you guys all so much. Adore you. And Sam, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at Sam Heaney. That is Heaney.
You can find me at Fabulous Brianna, FabulistBreanna. Again, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you in 2 weeks in watching time. Bye.